The execution fleet arrived above Earth at exactly 4:17 Galactic Standard, and for the first time in recorded history, every major government on the planet shut off its public broadcasts at the same moment. No speeches came from presidents. No military alerts screamed across civilian networks. Satellites continued drifting peacefully over cloud systems, while billions of people slept beneath quiet skies, completely unaware that 300 alien warships had already surrounded their world. Above the Pacific Ocean, hidden behind lunar shadow stealth fields, the Tribunal Armada waited in perfect formation, cold, silent, certain. Supreme Marshal Theron Call stood at the center of the flagship judgment of nations with his forearms folded behind a ceremonial cloak, while Earth rotated slowly beneath the observation glass. He had spent 40 years crushing rebellions at the edge of civilized space. He had watched empires collapse in nuclear fire. He had ordered species sterilized for violating council law. Humans did not frighten him. They irritated him. They still refused transmission requests. One of the officers reported quietly. Call's expression did not change. Expected. The holographic image of Earth shimmered between them, glowing blue against the darkness. Such an unimpressive world. One unstable species. One mediocre fleet. One civilization barely advanced enough to matter. And yet the Tribunal had deployed nearly a third of its military strength to this system. Not because humanity was powerful. Because humanity had lied. For almost 2 centuries, deep-range probes had vanished near human-controlled ocean worlds. Mining expeditions disappeared. Research vessels suffered impossible sensor failures. Entire sectors around Terran colonies became graveyards of corrupted navigation data, where stars themselves seemed to bend incorrectly. Every investigation ended the same way. Human diplomats smiling politely. Human commanders apologizing calmly. Humanity insisting nothing unusual existed. Until 6 days ago. That was when a Tribunal surveillance station hidden beyond Pluto intercepted a signal rising from Earth's Pacific Ocean. A signal so ancient that half the translation systems aboard the station shut down trying to identify it. The pulse lasted only 4 seconds. But in those 4 seconds, 17 elder species recognized the frequency instantly, because according to galactic history, that signal belonged to civilizations that had died before modern stars were charted. Civilizations erased so completely that even their names had become forbidden. Call remembered the fear inside the emergency council chamber after the recording played. Ancient species had gone pale. One ambassador collapsed unconscious before the signal finished. Another demanded Earth be sterilized immediately. Not invaded. Not sanctioned. Sterilized. Now the Tribunal fleet hovered over humanity's homeworld, preparing to seize whatever humanity had hidden beneath its oceans. Marshal, another officer whispered, voice uneasy. Long-range scans continue failing across the Pacific Basin. Call turned slowly. Explain. We cannot establish depth readings anymore. That ocean trench exceeds your scan range. No, sir. The officer hesitated. The problem is, the trench no longer appears to have a bottom. Silence spread across the bridge. Call stepped toward the display himself. The Pacific Ocean rotated into view, magnified thousands of times, until a massive section of black water filled the chamber hologram. At first, nothing appeared unusual. Then the ocean moved. Not waves. Not currents. Something beneath the water shifted. Every officer on the bridge went still as an impossible shadow slowly unfolded beneath the Pacific floor. Vast, circular, mechanical, larger than entire cities. Another shadow emerged beside it. Then another. The water above them began to vibrate. Across Earth, tides stopped moving. Ships lost navigation. Whales surfaced by the thousands and fled toward distant shores. And somewhere beneath 12 kilometers of black ocean water, something ancient opened its eyes. Warning sirens exploded across the Tribunal flagship. Massive energy spike detected. Gravity distortions increasing. Marshal, we're detecting structures rising from beneath the seabed. Call stared at the hologram as the Pacific Ocean bulged upward like something enormous was pressing against the crust from below. How many structures? He demanded. The officer's face had gone completely pale. 9. Then every screen aboard the execution fleet went black simultaneously. For 3 terrible seconds, the bridge existed in total darkness. When the displays returned, a single transmission filled every channel in the system. No identification, no translation delay, just a human voice. Old, tired, terrified. "You idiots," the voice whispered. "You woke them too early." For 12 seconds after the transmission ended, nobody aboard the tribunal flagship moved. Supreme Marshal Call remained frozen in front of the darkened observation glass, while warning sirens echoed through the bridge in sharp mechanical bursts. Officers shouted over one another. Sensor stations flooded with corrupted readings. Entire sections of the fleet abruptly lost synchronization with command relays, as if something beneath Earth's oceans was interfering with space itself. But Call barely heard any of it. His attention remained fixed on the planet below. Earth looked calm. That was the part he hated most. No defensive formation scrambled into orbit. No panic broadcasts emerged from the surface. Human cities still glittered peacefully across the night side of the world, while storms drifted naturally over continents like nothing had changed, as though humanity had expected this moment for a very long time. Re-establish planetary communications, Call ordered finally, his voice lower than before. "Now." "We're trying, Marshal," an officer answered. "Something is disrupting transmission layering across the Pacific Hemisphere." "Human jamming?" The officer hesitated. "No, sir. This doesn't behave like technology." Before Call could answer, another alarm detonated across the bridge. New contact signatures. The holographic display shifted instantly toward Earth oceans. 9 massive shapes were rising slowly beneath the water. Not ships, not structures. Something worse. Their outlines distorted continuously, too large for sensors to process correctly. One moment, the objects resembled circular machines buried beneath the seabed. The next, they appeared organic, like colossal skeletons sleeping beneath tectonic plates. Several officers looked away entirely after prolonged exposure to the feed caused migraines and nosebleeds. The largest shadow stretched nearly 400 kilometers wide, and it was still ascending. "Impossible," someone whispered. Call felt it then. Not fear. Pressure. A strange heaviness pressing behind his eyes. The same sensation he had experienced once before during a classified council expedition near the tomb regions beyond the Perseus Drift. Entire fleets had vanished there thousands of years ago, chasing relics left behind by civilizations older than recorded galactic language. Most species considered the stories myths now, but Call remembered the ruins. He remembered standing inside a dead structure older than suns, while ancient warning symbols covered walls no historian could translate. And he remembered the feeling, this exact feeling. His thoughts were interrupted by another transmission request. Human origin. The bridge officers exchanged uneasy glances. Call straightened immediately. "Accept it." The hologram flickered once. An old man appeared, gray-haired, weathered face, dark civilian coat, instead of military uniform. Behind him stretched a dimly lit control chamber filled with massive circular displays that resembled rotating oceans viewed from orbit. The man looked exhausted, not frightened. Exhausted. "My name is Elias Mercer," he said calmly, "Director of Terran Deepwater Command." Call narrowed his eyes. "You are in violation of 17 Council containment laws and under direct tribunal seizure authority." Mercer nodded faintly. "Yes, we know. No denial. No excuses." That unsettled Call more than resistance would have. "You concealed pre-civilization artifacts beneath your world." "Yes." "You interfered with Council investigations." "Yes." "You illegally occupied restricted ocean sectors across 32 systems." Mercer sighed softly. "Marshal, if we hadn't, your species would already be extinct." Murmurs erupted across the bridge. Call stepped forward slowly. "Careful, human." But Mercer ignored the threat entirely. For the first time, his tired eyes shifted away from Call towards something off-screen. Not fear. Concern. "Tell me something honestly." Mercer said quietly. "When your fleets arrived, did you fire into Pacific?" Call's silence answered for him. Mercer closed his eyes. And for a moment, the old man looked genuinely devastated. "You don't understand what you've done." "Then explain it." Mercer looked back at him. "You think humanity found ancient weapons?" His voice dropped lower. "We found locks." The bridge fell silent again. Before Call could speak, every light inside Mercer's command chamber suddenly dimmed blood red. A deep metallic sound echoed somewhere behind him. Not an alarm. A pulse. The human officers visible in the background immediately stopped working. Several slowly turned toward the darkness behind the chamber displays, as if hearing something ancient calling from far below. Mercer's expression changed instantly. For the first time since the transmission began, he looked afraid. One of the humans in the background whispered something Call's translator barely processed. "It's moving." Then the transmission glitched violently. The image distorted into static for half a second before stabilizing again. But Mercer was no longer alone. Someone was standing behind him. At first, Call thought it was another human officer. Then the figure stepped slightly forward into the red emergency lighting. The bridge temperature dropped 3 degrees instantly. Even through a hologram, every instinct in Call's body screamed that something was deeply wrong with the thing behind the human director. It resembled a person only in outline. Tall, thin, its surface flickered like black water, reflecting starlight. No visible eyes, no visible face, just shifting darkness shaped roughly into human form, and it was watching the tribunal bridge. Several officers recoiled instinctively. One collapsed unconscious. Mercer turned slowly, realizing the figure stood behind him. His face drained of color. "No," he whispered. The thing tilted its head slightly. Then every speaker aboard the tribunal flagship emitted the same sound simultaneously. A low oceanic groan. Ancient, vast, awake. And somewhere beneath the Pacific Ocean, the first of the 9 shadows touched the surface. The Pacific Ocean split open at 4:31 Galactic Standard Time. Not with an explosion. Not with a tidal wave. The water simply moved aside. Across every military feed in the solar system, billions of tons of ocean folded backward in perfect silence, as though gravity itself had forgotten how to function. Clouds above the Pacific Basin spiraled outward. Storm systems unraveled. Entire carrier groups drifting near international waters lost propulsion simultaneously as invisible pressure spread across the sea. And from the darkness below, something enormous began to rise. The tribunal fleet immediately pulled back into defensive formation. Call stood motionless while officers barked overlapping reports around him, but none of them mattered anymore. Every sensor aboard the Judgment of Nations had stopped classifying the object as machinery. The system could not identify it. Mass estimates fluctuated wildly. Energy readings contradicted one another every few seconds. Thermal scans suggested the structure was colder than surrounding seawater, while simultaneously generating heat signatures hotter than fusion reactors. It should not have existed, yet it continued ascending. At first, only fragments appeared above the waterline. Curved black surfaces wider than cities. Metallic ridges covered in symbols that shifted when never directly observed. Entire sections of the structure seemed damaged by unimaginable age, yet other portions looked disturbingly new, as if the ocean itself had been repairing it. Then the object rose higher, and the bridge fell silent. The thing emerging from Earth's ocean was not a ship. It was a ring, a colossal vertical ring stretching kilometers into the sky, rotating slowly as seawater poured endlessly from its surface. Layers of internal mechanisms moved deep within its hollow center, like gigantic bones turning beneath black skin. Lightning erupted across surrounding clouds. The ring answered, not with sound, with memory. Every sentient being aboard the tribunal fleet experienced it differently. Some officers saw burning worlds. Others heard voices speaking dead languages inside their skulls. One navigator began sobbing uncontrollably while repeating the same sentence over and over. They were running. They were all running. Call gripped the command rail hard enough to crack metal beneath one of his hands. The pressure inside his head intensified. Images flickered across his thoughts that did not belong to him. Vast oceans beneath unfamiliar stars. Cities collapsing underwater. Shapes moving through darkness between galaxies. Then the vision vanished instantly. "Marshal," an officer shouted. "We're receiving emergency transmissions from the Council Core." The main display erupted with incoming signals. Panic flooded every channel. Entire governments were demanding immediate updates. Elder species that had not intervened in galactic affairs for thousands of years suddenly activated emergency wartime protocols. Several ambassadors were openly screaming at one another across live diplomatic feeds. And one phrase repeated constantly: the anchors. Call turned sharply. Explain that term. No one answered, not until a new transmission forced itself onto the flagship's command network without authorization. An elderly alien appeared on the display. Tall, frail, covered in silver ceremonial robes marked with symbols older than modern galactic writing. Archivist Serafel of the Valar Continuum. Call felt genuine surprise. The Valar had abandoned interstellar politics nearly 20,000 years ago. Most younger civilizations believed they were extinct. Serafel looked directly into the camera with trembling eyes. How many have awakened? The ancient archivist demanded immediately. Call straightened. You know what those things are? The old being ignored the question completely. How many? One, Call admitted. Relief flooded Serafel's face, so intensely it almost looked painful. Then there is still time. Call's patience snapped. Explain yourself. The archivist stared at the rising structure above Earth for several long seconds before answering. In the oldest surviving records of our species, Serafel whispered, they were called ocean anchors, machines built before the first expansion, before hyperlanes, before most intelligent life crawled out of its atmosphere. Call frowned. Impossible. Yes, Serafel agreed softly. That is why your people erased the records. Silence spread across the bridge. The archivist continued. There were once 9 anchor worlds positioned across the spiral arms, every one hidden beneath oceans because water weakened their signal. His voice shook slightly. Ancient civilizations believed the anchors were prison gates. Call felt cold. Prison gates for what? Serafel looked away, and for the first time since appearing, the ancient alien seemed afraid to answer. We never discovered that part, he admitted quietly, because every species investigating the anchors vanished before learning the truth. On the display behind him, the massive ring above the Pacific rotated faster. Its hollow center slowly brightened. Deep beneath layers of moving mechanisms, something was forming inside the core. A light, soft at first, then stronger, blue-white, alive. Call stared at it. So humanity found one of these things, he said carefully, and decided to hide it from the galaxy. No, Serafel whispered. Call frowned. What? The archivist looked directly at him. They found all 9. The bridge erupted into chaos. Officers shouted over one another. Fleet commanders demanded immediate retreat authorization. Several species aboard auxiliary vessels began transmitting evacuation requests before Call silenced the channels personally. But through all the noise, one realization anchored itself inside his mind. Humanity had not spent centuries building military strength. Humanity had spent centuries guarding something. Another alarm detonated across the bridge. Marshal, the officer's voice cracked with panic. New contact emerging beneath Europa. A second display activated instantly. Then a third. Titan, Enceladus, the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic Rift. One by one, black circular shadows began moving beneath oceans across the solar system. And back on Earth, Elias Mercer returned to the transmission feed, looking 20 years older than before. You need to leave orbit, he said quietly. Call stared at him. What happens if we don't? Mercer's exhausted eyes drifted toward the glowing ring above the Pacific, then toward the stars beyond Earth. They'll think the prison is under attack, he whispered. Before Call could respond, the blue-white light inside the anchor suddenly pulsed once. Every human in the transmission chamber froze simultaneously, and far beyond Pluto, something answered the signal back. The response came from beyond the edge of map space. At first, nobody understood what they were seeing. Long-range observatory stationed near the Kuiper boundary detected a distortion moving through deep vacuum faster than any known propulsion system. Yet the object itself appeared motionless. Space folded incorrectly around it. Stars bent inward, as if dragged by invisible gravity. Entire sections of sensor data arrived corrupted before transmission even completed, while older navigation buoys simply vanished from existence without debris or radiation signatures. Then the listening stations died, not destroyed, silent. One moment they transmitted data. The next moment they were gone from every database in the solar system, as though history itself had lost track of them. Inside the tribunal flagship, officers stared at blank displays in growing horror. Replay the final transmission. Call ordered. The sensor officer swallowed hard. There's no replay, Marshal. What do you mean there's no replay? The files are empty. The officer's hands trembled against the console. The station sent something, but the recordings erased themselves when access. Call felt cold pressure settle deeper behind his eyes. Around Earth, the 9 awakened ocean shadows continued rising. The Pacific anchor had fully breached the surface now, towering above storm clouds like a black mechanical moon standing vertically inside the sea. Water spiraled endlessly around its rotating outer ring, while enormous geometric structures unfolded from its interior one layer at a time. Human cities along the western coastlines had gone dark voluntarily. No panic, no riots, just millions of lights shutting off together, as though the population already knew what came next. That disturbed Call more than the anchors themselves. "You're telling me," he said slowly, turning toward Mercer's hologram, "that humanity has known about this threat for centuries." Mercer didn't answer immediately. Behind him, Terran personnel moved frantically through deep water command, while entire sections of the chamber glowed crimson beneath emergency lighting. Massive displays rotated overhead, showing synchronized maps of oceans spread across human control worlds. 9 red circles pulsed across the projections, one for each anchor. "Yes," Mercer admitted finally. Call's voice hardened. "Then why conceal this from the Council?" Mercer looked genuinely stunned by the question. "Because your species would have done exactly what you just did." Call's silence confirmed it. The old human rubbed tiredly at his face before continuing. "The first anchor woke beneath the Mariana Trench 412 years ago. We thought it was a geological anomaly until an exploration team vanished inside it." His eyes darkened slightly. 3 days later, the team returned. Call noticed the hesitation immediately. "Returned how?" Mercer stared at the rotating Pacific structure. "They walked out of the ocean without pressure suits," he said quietly. "Every single one alive. Every single one convinced only a few hours had passed." A murmur spread across the bridge. "They've been missing for 3 months." Even Call felt unsettled by that. Mercer continued before anyone interrupted. The survivors described impossible places beneath the ocean floor, structures larger than continents, empty cities, machinery still running after millions of years. His voice lowered, and something sleeping deeper below them. Call narrowed his eyes. "What's sleeping?" Mercer ignored the question. "We buried the reports. Established Deepwater Command. Restricted every ocean trench on Earth." He gestured toward the holographic displays. "Then we started finding the others. Europa, Titan, ancient ocean planets nobody else wanted. Dead systems abandoned by the Council because nothing valuable existed there, except beneath the water. The anchors weren't random relics," Mercer said. "They form a network. Designed for what?" This time the human answered immediately, "To keep something out." The bridge fell silent again. Outside the flagship, the Pacific anchor emitted another low-frequency pulse that rolled across space like distant thunder. Several nearby tribunal cruisers abruptly lost power and drifted helplessly out of formation before emergency systems restarted seconds later. Then another alarm detonated. "Marshal, we're detecting movement near Pluto." The main display shifted instantly. At first, Call saw nothing unusual beyond scattered ice fields and drifting debris. Then the stars moved. A dark shape slowly emerged against the background of space itself, so massive that the human eye struggled to separate it from the void around it. No engines, no visible structure, just a distortion swimming through reality like something enormous beneath black water. One of the bridge officers whispered a prayer. The object pulsed once. Every screen across the tribunal fleet flickered simultaneously. Then all translated text aboard every vessel changed into the same unknown symbols covering the anchors. Call felt genuine fear for the first time in decades. "How long until contact?" he demanded. "Unknown," the navigation officer answered weakly. "It doesn't follow conventional movement patterns." Another transmission forced itself through fleet communications. This time it wasn't Mercer. A woman appeared instead, dark-skinned, mid-30s, blood visible beneath one nostril, as if internal pressure was affecting her physically. Scientific insignia marked her uniform. "Marshal Call," she said quickly. "My name is Dr. Lena Vale, Xenostructure Division." Call recognized desperation in her eyes immediately. "What is it?" "We were wrong about the prison theory." The bridge went still. Vale looked over her shoulder nervously before continuing. "The anchors aren't containment devices." Her voice trembled slightly. "They're warning systems." Call frowned. "Explain." But before she could answer, something happened behind her. Every human scientist inside the chamber suddenly froze. All of them, at once. Their eyes drifted upward towards something unseen. Vale noticed it too. Slowly, carefully, she turned around. Call watched the color drain from her face. "What are they looking at?" he demanded. Vale whispered her answer. "The ocean." Then the transmission feed abruptly shifted cameras on its own. Call found himself staring at a live external view of the Pacific anchor. The massive rotating ring had stopped moving. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then the hollow center opened completely, and something inside looked back out. At first, Call thought the thing inside the anchor was another machine. That assumption lasted less than 2 seconds. The Pacific structure towered above the ocean like a vertical black continent, its rotating layers now fully separated around the glowing center. Lightning spiraled endlessly around its surface, while gravity distortions bent nearby clouds into impossible shapes. And inside the hollow core, suspended within blue-white light, something enormous moved, not mechanically, breathing. The bridge temperature aboard the Judgment of Nations dropped sharply as every sensor in orbit overloaded simultaneously. Several officers collapsed unconscious before emergency systems flooded command deck with stimulants. Others simply stared at the live feed in mute horror, unable to process what they were seeing. Cole understood why. The thing inside the anchor was not fully visible. Reality itself seemed unable to hold its shape around it. One moment the entity resembled a skeletal figure larger than mountains. The next it appeared fluid, made from shifting oceans and fragments of stars compressed into humanoid form. Entire sections of its body vanished whenever directly observed, as though the mind refused to complete the image. And its eyes, Cole immediately wished he had never seen them, not because they were monstrous, because they looked exhausted. The entity gazed outward from the glowing core with an ancient, immeasurable sadness that somehow felt worse than hatred. Then every human across the transmission feed dropped to one knee simultaneously, Mercer included. Not worship, recognition. Call turned sharply toward the hologram. "What is that?" Mercer's answer came quietly. "We call them Wardens." The word spread to the bridge like poison. Call felt his pulse rising now, instinct screaming at him to retreat, while reason fought desperately to maintain control. The tribunal fleet had arrived expecting hidden weapons, illegal technology, maybe ancient warships. Nothing about this matched military logic anymore. The Pacific Wardens slowly raised one massive hand toward the stars. The entire solar system trembled. Moon orbits shifted by fractions. Tidal systems destabilized across Earth. Hundreds of smaller vessels lost artificial gravity at once, as invisible waves rolled outward from the anchor network. And somewhere beyond Pluto, the approaching darkness accelerated. An officer's voice cracked across the bridge. The anomaly changed direction. "How?" "It's heading directly toward Earth now." Call stared at the sensor feed. The distant distortion no longer drifted randomly through deep space. It moved with purpose now, deliberate, focused, as if the awakening Wardens had announced their location. Mercer closed his eyes briefly. "That's why we hid them," he whispered. Call rounded on him instantly. "You've known this entire time." "We suspected." You endanger the galaxy. No! Mercer snapped suddenly, and for the first time real anger entered his voice. We protected it. The bridge fell silent. Mercer stepped closer to the transmission camera. When humanity found the first anchor, we thought exactly like you do now. We believed they were relics, weapons, ancient power waiting to be controlled. His jaw tightened. Then we activated one by accident. Call noticed something strange then. The old human looked ashamed. Not proud. Ashamed. We lost 12 million people in the Atlantic collapse. Mercer continued quietly. 3 cities disappeared beneath the ocean in less than an hour. His eyes darkened, because the warden woke up screaming. No one aboard the flagship spoke. We spent decades trying to understand what they were, Mercer said, and eventually we learned the truth. The Pacific Warden shifted again inside the glowing core. Its enormous gaze slowly turned upward toward the stars beyond Earth, toward the approaching anomaly. Mercer followed its line of sight. The anchors aren't prisons, he said softly. They're doors. Call felt the bridge go cold around him. Another pulse rolled through the solar system. This time, the humans reacted differently. Across every transmission feed visible from Earth, people stopped moving. Civilians, soldiers, children, billions of humans suddenly turning their eyes toward the oceans at exactly the same moment. Call watched a crowded street in Tokyo freeze mid-motion. Traffic halted. Entire crowds slowly lifted their heads toward the sky as though hearing something far away. One little girl smiled, then spoke words no translation system recognized. The bridge officers recoiled instinctively. What did she say? Call demanded. No one answered. Not until Dr. Lena Vale reappeared beside Mercer, blood now running visibly from both ears. Her breathing looked uneven. They're synchronizing, she whispered. With what? Vale stared directly into the camera. With us. Call's stomach tightened. The scientist swallowed hard before continuing. The Wardens aren't machines. They're interfaces. Her voice shook slightly. They were designed to bond with intelligent species capable of surviving extreme trauma patterns. Call frowned. Trauma? Mercer answered this time. War. Extinction events. Collapse. Recovery. He gestured toward Earth behind him. The anchors only respond to civilizations that continue functioning after catastrophic loss. Understanding hit the bridge in terrible silence. Humanity had not been chosen because it was strongest. Humanity had been chosen because it endured suffering better than almost any species in galactic history. Call suddenly remembered something buried deep inside ancient council archives. Old studies describing humans as psychologically abnormal, too resilient, too adaptive, too capable of functioning under conditions that shattered other intelligent races. The galaxy mocked humanity for surviving chaos. The anchors had selected them for exactly that reason. Another alarm exploded across the bridge. Marshall, the officer looked moments from panic. The anomaly just entered the heliosphere. The main display shifted instantly. Space near Pluto tore open. Not metaphorically. Actually opened. A black fracture stretched across the darkness between stars like reality itself splitting apart. From inside emerged shapes so massive that sensor systems crashed attempting to calculate scale. Call felt his breath stop. The approaching entities resembled fragments of unfinished universes. Half-organic structures wrapped around collapsing geometry. Moving cathedrals of black matter drifting through the fracture, while entire sections of nearby space decayed around them. And behind them, something bigger waited. Mercer stared at the feed with hollow eyes. They found the signal, he whispered. Call looked toward him slowly. What are they? The old human took several seconds to answer. Then he spoke the words humanity had hidden from the galaxy for 4 centuries. They're the reason the Wardens were built. The first alien fleet turned to flee 32 minutes after the fracture opened beyond Pluto. Call watched it happen in real time. A Virexian carrier group stationed near Jupiter abruptly broke formation and activated emergency warp drives without authorization. Thousands of smaller escort ships followed immediately behind them, scattering across the outer system in chaotic retreat patterns, while desperate transmissions flooded every military channel. The messages all carried the same meaning. Run. One of Call's officers looked toward him nervously. "Marshal, should we order system withdrawal?" Call didn't answer, because the thing emerging from the fracture had just noticed the fleeing ships. The dark mass beyond Pluto shifted slightly. That tiny movement erased an entire cruiser squadron. No weapons fired. No explosion. The ships simply disappeared mid-transmission, along with every signal, every record, every digital trace that they had ever existed. Nearby vessels suddenly lost crew memories of the destroyed squadron entirely. Officers stared at empty tactical displays with growing confusion, unable to understand why formation gaps existed where ships clearly should have been. One navigator frowned at a station. "Marshal, weren't there more vessels in Sector 8 a moment ago?" Call felt genuine terror settle into his chest. Not destruction. Erasure. The anomaly wasn't attacking matter. It was attacking reality itself. Around Earth, the anchors reacted instantly. All 9 structures illuminated together across the solar system, sending enormous pillars of blue-white light into space. The Pacific Warden fully emerged from its rotating ring now, towering above the ocean like a god dragged screaming from ancient depths. And it was not alone anymore. Europa's ocean split open next, then Titan, then the black waters beneath Enceladus erupted outward as another colossal warden rose into the darkness above Saturn. 9 worlds, 9 sleeping giants awakening simultaneously. Every human transmission network immediately switched frequencies. Emergency broadcasts spread across Earth and the Terran colonies with terrifying efficiency. But instead of panic instructions or evacuation orders, humanity transmitted something far stranger. Memories. Call stared at the nearest display in confusion as civilian broadcasts flooded the system. Human wars, natural disasters, famine, collapse, entire archives of suffering transmitted openly across synchronized anchor frequencies. A human officer holding his dying brother beneath burning rubble. A mother singing during a planetary blackout, while artillery shook the sky outside. Refugee ships drifting through failed colonies. Children laughing in flooded shelters after losing everything. Call turned sharply toward Mercer's feed. "What are you doing?" The old human looked exhausted beyond words. "Feeding the network." "That makes no sense." "It doesn't to your species." Mercer's eyes remained fixed on the growing fracture beyond Pluto. The warden stabilized through emotional resonance. Call stared at him in disbelief. "You're telling me those things operate on grief?" "Not grief." Mercer shook his head faintly. "Survival." The Pacific Warden moved again. Its enormous body unfolded slowly from the anchor core, while oceans spiraled upward around it like living rings. Across Earth, billions of humans continued broadcasting memories into the network voluntarily. Not fear, endurance. And the Warden answered. For the first time since awakening, it raised its head fully toward the stars. Then it spoke, not through language, through feeling. The sound rolled across every communication system in the solar system like an ancient heartbeat. Call felt impossible emotions slam into him all at once. Loss without surrender, pain without collapse, fury sharpened into determination. Several alien officers aboard the flagship began crying openly without understanding why. One whispered softly, "How many times did they survive this?" Mercer heard him. "Enough," the human answered quietly. Another pulse erupted from the fracture. This time smaller shapes emerged first. Dozens of them. Angular black entities twisting through vacuum like predatory thoughts escaping containment. They moved unnaturally fast, phasing between positions rather than traveling conventionally. Wherever they passed, nearby systems malfunctioned instantly. Entire satellites aged thousands of years in seconds before disintegrating into dust. The first creature reached Neptune's orbit moments later. Council fleets opened fire immediately. Plasma cannons illuminated deep space. Railgun strikes shattered moons. Molecular lances tore through darkness hard enough to bend local gravity. None of it mattered. The entity absorbed the attacks completely. Not shielded. Absorbed. Call watched in horror as entire weapon systems simply ceased functioning after contact. Their energy redirected into creatures' constantly shifting surface. Then the entity looked toward the nearest alien fleet. Every crew member aboard 6 destroyers committed suicide simultaneously. The ships drifted dead through space seconds later. Silence consumed the command bridge. "Dear gods," someone whispered. But humanity moved before panic could spread further. The Pacific Warden lifted one colossal hand toward Neptune. The solar system shook. Ancient symbols ignited across every anchor simultaneously, while oceans on all 9 worlds erupted into synchronized spirals visible from orbit. Human transmissions intensified instantly, billions of minds feeding memories into the network faster and faster. Call suddenly understood the horrifying truth. The Wardens were not powered by reactors. They were powered by civilizations. And humanity had spent 4 centuries preparing themselves psychologically to become part of the system. The Pacific Warden opened its hand. A pulse of blue-white light crossed the solar system instantly, not traveling, appearing. The black entity near Neptune froze mid-motion. For one impossible second, Call saw its true shape beneath the distortion around it. Something ancient and starving wrapped in layers of broken reality. Then the light hit fully. The creature screamed. Every speaker across every ship exploded simultaneously as raw sound tore through communication channels hard enough to rupture blood vessels. Officers collapsed screaming. Several AIs aboard nearby fleets shut themselves down permanently rather than process the noise. And then the entity came apart. Not destroyed. Unwritten. Its body fragmented into streams of collapsing symbols before dissolving completely into empty space. The bridge fell silent. Humanity had just erased something combined council fleets could not even damage. But Mercer wasn't celebrating. Call noticed immediately. The old human stared beyond Neptune with growing dread. "Why aren't you reacting?" Call demanded. Mercer answered without looking away from the fracture. "Because that wasn't attack force." Call felt cold settle into his bones. Then the darkness beyond Pluto moved again. And this time, the real enemy began to emerge. The thing entering the solar system did not resemble life. It resembled collapse given shape. Call stood frozen at the center of the judgment of nations, while the fracture beyond Pluto widened slowly across the stars, stretching until entire constellations vanished behind it. Around the Terran space, reality folded inward like burned paper curling at the edges of flame. Gravitational fields failed completely. Time synchronization collapsed across dozens of nearby vessels. Some ships experienced missing minutes. Others aged crews inconsistently, leaving officers suddenly gray-haired while younger soldiers stared at them in confusion. And through the fracture, the architect emerged. Not a ship, not a creature, a presence. It moved with horrifying slowness. Yet every tactical system in the solar system screamed that it was approaching faster than light should allow. Its body appeared unfinished, assembled from impossible geometry and fragments of broken stars rotating around a dark central mass that swallowed every known wavelength. Even the Wardens reacted. For the first time since awakening, the 9 giants shifted backwards slightly across their respective worlds. Not retreat, recognition. The Pacific Warden lowered its enormous head toward the incoming darkness, as if remembering something ancient and terrible. Call's breathing slowed involuntarily. The pressure inside his skull had become nearly unbearable now. Thoughts no longer felt entirely his own. Strange impressions drifted constantly at the edge of awareness. Vast oceans beneath dead galaxies. Civilizations extinguished before developing language. Planets emptied so completely that even their fossils disappeared. The architect carried extinction around it like gravity, and humanity had been waiting for it. "Marshal," an officer whispered weakly, "multiple fleets are abandoning defensive positions." Call looked toward the tactical displays. Chaos had consumed the outer system. Entire alien armadas were fleeing toward emergency warp points despite the impossibility of escape. Smaller governments transmitted surrender offers directly into deep space, as though negotiation with the thing might still be possible. Several species had already begun destroying their own historical archives to prevent cultural contamination before annihilation arrived. The galaxy had stopped thinking about victory. Now it thought only about surviving a few minutes longer. Then Earth interrupted the panic. Every human frequency across the solar system synchronized instantly. Civilian broadcasts ceased. Military chatter vanished. Even emergency channels fell silent. And from the Pacific anchor, a single transmission rolled outward across space. Human voices, billions of them, not screaming, singing. Call felt the sound before understanding it. Low at first, steady, ancient, the melody spread across Earth, then outward to the colonies, flowed between worlds like a pulse moving through a nervous system. Different languages joined together gradually, different cultures, different histories, but the emotion beneath it remained identical. Defiance. The Wardens answered immediately. All 9 giants illuminated at once, blue-white light surging through their enormous forms, while oceans spiraled upward around them in continent-sized rings. Across the solar system, the synchronized song intensified, feeding directly into the anchor network, and the architect slowed. For the first time since entering real space, the impossible entity hesitated. Call stared in disbelief. It's reacting to them. Mercer appeared on the command feed again, exhaustion carved deep into his face now. Blood stained the collar of his uniform. Behind him, Deepwater Command looked half-collapsed from system overloads. "It doesn't understand us," he said quietly. Call turned sharply. "What?" The architects evolved to eliminate predictable civilizations. Stable species. Ordered species. Mercer gestured toward the synchronized human broadcast spreading across the system. Humanity isn't stable. The old man actually smiled then, not confidently. Sadly, we survive chaos by becoming worse than it. The architect shifted again. This time the darkness around it rippled violently. Cole realized suddenly that the entity was trying to process the human signal and failing, because the memories flooding the network contradicted themselves constantly. Love beside atrocity. Mercy beside war. Compassion fused with brutality. Humanity broadcasting centuries of contradiction directly into a mind designed around perfect logical cycles. The architect could not predict them, and that uncertainty frightened it. But not enough. The fracture widened further. More shapes emerged behind the central mass now. Thousands of smaller entities writhing through broken space, like shards splitting from a dying universe. The solar system darkened visibly as they approached. Call felt hope collapsing around the bridge. Even the Wardens could not stop that many. Mercer seemed to realize the same thing. His expression hardened suddenly. Prepare the final sequence. Behind him, human officers froze. One woman whispered in horror, "Director, no." Call narrowed his eyes. What final sequence? Mercer looked directly at him. The anchors can reseal the fracture permanently. His voice remained calm, but only if the network burns itself out completely. Understanding hit the bridge instantly. Call stepped forward. How many casualties? Mercer didn't answer immediately, because he already knew. All anchor worlds, he whispered finally. The tactical displays glowed red. Earth, Europa, Titan, every human ocean colony connected to the network. Billions. Call stared at the old man in disbelief. You're willing to sacrifice your entire species? Mercer's tired eyes drifted toward Earth below. "No," he said softly. "We're willing to save everyone else." Silence crushed the bridge. No species in galactic history had ever chosen extinction voluntarily for civilizations that hated them, and somehow humanity was considering it without hesitation. The Pacific Warden raised both enormous hands slowly toward the stars. The oceans of Earth began to boil. Across every continent, people looked upward as the sky filled with blue-white light bright enough to eclipse dawn itself. Human broadcasts intensified further, billions of voices still singing together, while the anchor network charged toward catastrophic overload. The architect finally reacted. For the first time, Call felt emotion from it, not hunger, fear. The entity surged forward violently toward Earth, dragging entire storms of broken reality behind it as the smaller swarm followed close behind. It understood what humanity intended now, and it was desperate to stop them. Then Dr. Lena Vale appeared beside Mercer, pale and shaking. "We found another option," she whispered. Mercer turned sharply. "Impossible." Vale looked toward the Pacific Warden. "No," she said quietly. "Worse." Call felt cold dread rise immediately. "What option?" Vale swallowed hard. Then she spoke the sentence that made even the Wardens hesitate. "We can open the door wider." For the first time since the crisis began, Elias Mercer looked completely shaken, not afraid, broken. The old director stared at Dr. Lena Vale as though she had suggested setting fire to the stars themselves. Around them, Deep Water Command trembled beneath continuous anchor overloads, while warning systems screamed across every visible display. Outside Earth, the 9 Wardens held formation against the approaching architect swarm, their colossal bodies glowing so brightly that oceans across the solar system had begun evaporating into orbit. And still the enemy kept coming. Faster now. Desperate. "They'll consume the network," Mercer whispered. Vale shook her head violently. "Not if we force synchronization first." Call frowned from the tribunal bridge. "Explain." But Vale barely seemed aware he existed anymore. Her eyes remained locked on the Pacific Warden towering above Earth. "The architect doesn't understand unstable consciousness," she said quickly. "That's why humanity disrupts them. Contradiction creates interference." Blood ran visibly from her nose now. But the Wardens were never meant to destroy the architects. Mercer closed his eyes slowly. They were meant to teach them. Silence spread across both command centers. Call felt the meaning hit him seconds later. The Wardens were not weapons, not prisons, not shields. They were translators. Vale moved to the nearest console, hands trembling as she activated planetary synchronization displays. "We've been thinking about survival all wrong," she whispered. "The ancient civilizations failed because they fought individually. Ordered minds, predictable minds." She looked up toward the stars beyond Earth. "But humanity survived because we never became one thing." Call suddenly understood the horrifying scale of what she intended. "You want to connect the architect to the human network." Mercer looked sick. "It could corrupt every mind on Earth." "It already is," Vale snapped, gesturing toward the displays. She was right. Across the planet, humanity had already entered partial synchronization with the anchors. Billions of people stood motionless beneath glowing skies, while fragments of shared memory drifted unconsciously between minds. Children dreaming of wars they never lived through. Soldiers remembering oceans on worlds they had never seen. Humanity was already becoming something larger than itself, and the architect feared it. Outside Neptune, the black swarm accelerated violently toward Earth, as if sensing the danger growing inside the network. The Pacific Warden answered immediately. Its enormous body unfolded fully for the first time. Call felt the breath leave his lungs. The giant standing above Earth no longer resembled a machine at all. Blue-white ocean spiraled inside translucent skeletal structures larger than mountain ranges, while entire star systems flickered faintly beneath its surface like memories trapped beneath ice. Ancient, wounded, alive. Then the Warden turned toward Earth itself and gently lowered one massive hand toward the planet. Mercer stared upward. "It's asking permission." Call looked at him sharply. Permission for what? But he already knew. Humanity had not been chosen because it was strong enough to command the Wardens. Humanity had been chosen because it was willing to share suffering instead of escaping it. Mercer inhaled shakily, then activated the final authorization. Across Earth, every human transmission device switched on simultaneously. Phones, radios, military relays, ancient analog systems buried in museums. Billions of screens illuminated with the same message. "Open the door." The response came instantly, not from governments, from people across every continent. Human beings accepted synchronization voluntarily. Call watched in stunned silence as planetary neural activity surged beyond measurable levels. The anchor network exploded with light, while memories flooded outward across space in endless waves. Humanity opened itself completely. Grief, love, war, laughter, genocide, mercy, every contradiction, every wound, every impossible act of cruelty and kindness braided together into one chaotic consciousness, stretching across the solar system. And for the first time, the architect stopped moving entirely. The black entity reached the edge of Earth's orbit, then froze. Call fell to try and understand. The architects had consumed civilizations for millions of years by reducing them into predictable cycles. Every species eventually stabilized into logic, order, repetition. But humanity refused to stabilize. Even united, they remained chaotic. Pain became compassion. Loss became stubbornness. Fear became defiance. The architect entered the network fully and drowned. Every human memory struck it simultaneously. Children laughing during bombings. Mothers protecting strangers during collapse. Soldiers sacrificing themselves for people they hated. Humanity surviving extinction after extinction without ever becoming simple enough to predict. The architect recoiled violently. For the first time since entering the galaxy, the impossible entity experienced confusion, then something stranger, empathy. The fracture beyond Pluto destabilized instantly. Thousands of smaller entities began collapsing backward into broken space, while the central mass convulsed beneath impossible emotional overload. The architect had evolved to process systems. Humanity was not a system. Humanity was a storm. The Wardens moved together. All 9 giants raised their hands toward the fracture simultaneously, while oceans across the solar system erupted into spirals of blue-white light. The synchronized network surged one final time, and the door closed, not with violence, with silence. The fracture folded inward slowly until stars reappeared behind it once more. The remaining architect fragments retreated into darkness, not destroyed, but changed, confused, hesitant, afraid to return. Then the light faded. Across Earth, billions of humans collapsed unconscious beneath suddenly quiet skies. The Wardens went still, motionless again above their oceans, watching, waiting. Call stood alone on the silent bridge of the Judgment of Nations, while alien fleets across the solar system drifted helplessly in the aftermath. Nobody spoke for a very long time. Finally, one of Call's officers whispered the thought every species had reached simultaneously. The humans saved us. Call looked down toward Earth, toward the species as people had mocked for centuries. Weak, primitive, chaotic, and somehow strong enough to stare into the oldest horror in existence and teach it uncertainty. Days later, the surviving fleets gathered above Earth in silence, not as conquerors, not as rulers, as witnesses. Human cities slowly reignited beneath recovering skies, while the 9 Wardens remained stationed above their oceans like eternal black guardians. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. Humanity had convinced extinction itself to hesitate. And deep beneath the Pacific anchor, far below the crushing dark where no human had ever reached alive, one final signal pulsed quietly into the abyss. Not ancient, not alien, human, and something in the darkness answered back.